Welcome. This is part 2, the second hour of the advanced aromatherapy class. We had a little intermission. We're back. We had our chocolate sustenance, and the ladies checked my teeth, made sure I didn't have any chocolate in them so that we wouldn't share that with our video audience. So we're going to start now with clary sage. You'll find that in the box. Clary sage is known as the oil of laughter, and it's a euphoric. It's one of my absolute favorite oils. It smells a little bit musky and very earthy. It's grounding. Now this is an oil that we want to be very careful of using in the first trimester of pregnancy because it has a strong effect on the glandular system. So anciently it was used in muscatel wine with elderflowers, and it was highly regarded by the Romans and talked about by Pliny. And it was often used as an eye wash for inflammation and spots on the eyelids. And this was amusing to me. It was said that anciently if you used an infusion, which is they boiled the herb and put it in an infusion the size of a half of an eggshell, and then you drank that was going to cure you from envy and anger. So there you go, the infusion. And it was considered an aphrodisiac in the 12th century. And the herb has been prized for its ability to create a feeling of just complete tranquility and serenity. It's one of the ones that I like to put on the edges of my pillow to help me sleep at night. It smells really good. And if you smelled it, did it smell like it was going to be a more earthy base note or a top note? How did it smell? Full, rich, would it be? I'm guessing, I'm putting you on the spot. Base, exactly right, yeah. So the reason I'm doing that is so that you can smell something, kind of figure out, oh yeah, that's probably a top note, or that's kind of middle, that's probably a middle note. And if it's real deep and earthy, that's a base note. So, clary sage influences the functioning of the hypothalamus, which is the primitive area of our brain, and it helps to control emotions like fear, anxiety, and paranoia. So, now that might not be a big deal for some of us, but one of us in our studio audience here works with people who are in the psych ward. So paranoia is something that you deal with. So it all depends on where you are. But that could be really important if you had a patient that you were working with and you could use clary sage, then adding that one subtle effect would help too. It's one of the oils that influences our dreams and helps us to have nicer dreams, more pleasant dreams, and it also helps to have the recall in the morning. I don't know about you, but a lot of the time when I am trying to problem solve, the answers will come through dreams, but it's sometimes hard to remember them, so I often keep just a notepad by my bed so that when I first wake up, whatever it was I was dreaming about. A little side note there. My friend that is here pointed out, and I wanted to include this, that the first sense that we have as infants is the sense of smell, and that infants know who their mother is by that sense of smell. And of course they do. That's pretty amazing though. So that's the first aromatherapy that we're exposed to, right? Our mother. So clary sage is known as the oil of laughter, like I mentioned, because it's a euphoric. It just makes you feel happy. And it's also a really good antifungal, and it's cytophylactic. That's a big name. What that means is it helps the cells to grow. So if you've got a wound or you have a problem where you need more cells to grow to heal, then clary sage is one of them. Lavender is also a really good cytophylactic, cell regenerating. I have to correct because sometimes I'm used to those words and forget that not everyone is. It's an anti-inflammatory, it's sedative, and I think that when you smell it, you can, oh yeah, it feels kind of calming. It's not like, I gotta get up and do something, like when you smell peppermint. So I want you to kind of tune into that as we're smelling the various oils. How does it affect your nervous system or your emotional system? And then when you go out and you're exposed to different oils, you kind of have a sense of that when you smell them. You'll be able to learn to identify that. It's also a really good deodorant and aphrodisiac and antidepressant. It works really well in areas for balancing energy, and it may help with frigidity and impotence. And yes, we're going to talk about that just a little bit here in this presentation. Because clary sage has some really interesting applications for that. And if you're in a relationship the intimacy department is a really important part of that. And there's not a lot of information, so I'm not going to get too verbose about that, but I'm going to talk a little bit about it. So clary sage is excellent for menopausal symptoms and for women. So then the hot flashes and the night sweats and palpitations, irritability, headaches, all of those are really good to use clary sage for. It's also excellent for period pains. If I have a client that comes in and they have cramps, I'll rub it. Not only I let them rub it here, you know, on the abdomen, but right here on the sacrum. Because how often when you're having period cramps do you hurt in your sacrum as well? So my sister has fibrositis or fibromyalgia, and we used 2 essential oils that would take down the swelling and help with the pain more than her prescription medications. Clary sage and clove. And we put them in rubbing alcohol. And I put them on because the rubbing alcohol was the carrier, and it would be absorbed into her skin. And it was very impressive how that worked. So it's really helpful for pain. And it's balancing to the feminine reproductive system. It's good for enlarged breasts, swollen breasts, which happens during PMS sometimes. That's a really good one if the woman tends to have irregular periods. It will help bring on a period. So that being said, you want to use it prior to pregnancy and not if you're trying to become pregnant, and not during pregnancy for the first 5 months, because it has such a strong effect on the hormonal system. It's an excellent antispasmodic, so it's going to work with that pain and the muscle spasm. It relaxes muscles and nerves. It lowers blood pressure. So I think one of you was talking about that they have low blood pressure. So clary sage is not one that you're going to want to use a lot of. You could use it in a smaller amount. It also decreases gas and indigestion. There's that flatulence thing again. But you know, it can be a serious social inhibitor. Good to know. It also relieves hemorrhoids, which is a big problem in pregnancy later on. So after the 5th month, you could use that. Good for spasms in the stomach, intestines, and it's really good for irritable bowel system syndrome. So also like the colitis or the Crohn's, anything where you've got irritation of the bowel, that's going to be helpful. And it strengthens the stomach and the kidneys. It helps treat arthritis. So again, that fibromyalgia or fibrositis, itis means inflammation, myalgia means pain. So that's inflammation and pain of the muscle system, causes swelling, that kind of thing. So clary sage, again, really helpful for that. Really good for all kinds of inflammatory states, whether that's the skin or the swelling of the muscles, that kind of thing. My sister used to get seriously a couple of inches of edema swelling across this area, and she was actually in the hospital for a couple of months when she was 16 as they were trying to diagnose this. It's a really big deal. It also disrupted her sleep patterns, and clary sage is something that can help with that, to help you sleep better. So it's really good for treating varicose veins, and it's really good for throat infections. Now, this isn't one you're going to want to take internally, and I'll just add the caveat here. There are 2 very prominent essential oil companies out there that are endorsing the internal use of essential oils. And I'm going to say stop, don't do it, never do it. Only essential oils that I ever take internally are clove, and you got to make sure that it's organic clove, because again, things are very, very concentrated. And I use that 1 drop at a time. If I'm getting a sore throat, I'll put it in my cocoa, because chocolate is my carrier of choice. Put 1 drop in and agitate the glass really well, you know, stir it up, because where the clove contacts your lips, you can feel it. But it has pain-killing properties in the back of the throat. So, that being said, we'll get to clove in a second. It works for sore throats, but in clary sage, you're not going to take it internally. You're going to rub it here, where the swollen glands are, in here. And then the eustachian tube is right here. So all around here would help with the sore throat. And it's also one that helps with lowering the glucose level, so it helps maintain blood sugar. So I'm going to go fairly quickly through these. It works with insomnia. We mentioned that sleep disorder that went along with the fibromyalgia. Asthma, boils. Not too many people have boils, but when you do, it's really gross. Colic, frigidity, kidney disorders, ulcers, whooping cough. And that used to be, remember, it was almost eradicated, and now we have an epidemic in Washington State and other states because people are choosing not to inoculate their children, or there are people coming in from other areas. Although, if they immigrate, they make them have all their shots. It's mandatory. Convulsions, flatulence, and hysteria. Emotionally, this is a realm that it really works a lot in. It's a nerve tonic, so it's soothing and calming. And it's very powerful for treating nervousness, fear, paranoia, panic, and balancing the emotions. So if you need a little uplifting or stimulation, or you need a little lowering and calming, it's going to help with that. And really good for nervous burnout. So if you've just finished like a massive project and you just got it done, you're feeling kind of emotionally and physically spent, clary sage is going to be a really good oil for that. And it has mild euphoric and possibly aphrodisiac qualities. It's good for emotional clearing. So that was one of the oils that I mentioned to my client that would help her in her meditative process and clearing the emotional blocks. It decreases emotional tension, anxiety, depression, and especially postnatal depression. For some women, that is a huge problem. So that's a good thing. And it helps to impart a sense of clarity. And I think that's really important. Sometimes when we're problem solving, the clarity is hard to get to. And so if you could do something that would help you to get to that, I think that's important. Helps with confidence and courage. Jasmine is also an oil, I'm just throwing this in there, it's really good for confidence. And clary sage can be inspiring. It's really good for people with mood swings. It seems to me that there is a lot more diagnosis going around with bipolar disorder, or they used to call it manic depressive disorder, but that's no longer politically correct. So this would be something that could go along with the medication to help. Never saying that you get off your medication. Do what your doctor said, and then use layers of help along with the way that you think. And marjoram, you can use clary sage and marjoram together for nervous exhaustion. But clary sage is used very, very extensively in skincare and hair care. And it's good for especially dry and mature skin. So, like myself, it's good that I like it. It's another one that stimulates cell growth, so it's that cytophylactic. And our cell turnover, especially in our face, it lowers as we age. So it's really good for that. It's a regenerator for skin and hair. It minimizes wrinkles. And it helps with inflamed skin. And it's a good skin balancer, so it would be good in a toner. My toner of choice is witch hazel because it's natural. It's got a little bit of alcohol, but then you can add your essential oils to it because it's a really good dispersant. And this is important. It helps preserve moisture in the skin. And as we age, again, we get drier and drier skin. So it's good for that. It acts as an astringent and a scalp stimulant, and it's good for oily hair. So the organ and meridians that it targets are the hypothalamus, stomach, the reproductive organs, the kidneys, and it also helps overcome adrenal fatigue. So now reading that also makes sense to me that I would love clary sage because of the adrenal thing. So the chakras that it helps with are the heart and sex chakras. The chakra system was developed anciently in India. And there are some very powerful scientific validation that we have these energy centers in our bodies that start here and come all the way up to the top of our head. So this one works with that. Now, a couple of cautions. You don't want to use too much of this because it can cause nausea. And one of the sources says don't use it while you're driving. Now, maybe you would get really high with it. I don't know. But I thought I'd throw it in there. It seemed a little interesting. You don't want to use it in the first 5 months of pregnancy. I have never had any adverse reaction. Oh, I'm on clary sage. They're going to pull me over. Yeah, but it's in there. So there you go. In blending and perfumery, so we're looking ahead. What would you guess? It goes the whole spectrum. It's a tricky one. So bass all the way up to a middle note. Not the whole spectrum, sorry, it's not a top note. But bass to middle, okay? And some sources do say it's a top note. But it's distilled from the leaves. A lot of the bass notes are distilled from the bark and the roots, so they're more grounding, heavier oils. I think it's really, smells like earth to me. Very, very musky, earthy smell. And so it blends really well with other wood oils, like frankincense and myrrh and cedarwood. And then also with the sandalwood also. And then the citrus oils and the conifers, lavender, or excuse me, pine. So anyway, that's what it's working with. Now these are the scientific studies. I mentioned this one in the last one, but it bears repeating. Clary sage is an oil that's used to increase testosterone, and that is a big deal in society right now. They talk about low T. And there's a lot of pharmaceutical remedies for that. Well, they found that clary sage is very powerful in increasing testosterone, specifically in women, but it also works in men. And I also read that the pharmaceutical companies are trying to buy out the clary sage growers so that they have all of the supply. It's a little bit scary, but it's that effective, okay? And we talked about menstrual pain. It's very, very effective in that. They did a study with 48 women who had clinical levels of pain with their periods, and they used a 3% dilution in a carrier cream. And then they rubbed it on their lower abdomen, and they used lavender, clary sage, and marjoram. And it said that they had a very significant decrease in the intensity of their periods and the duration of period pain. Intensity of pain during their periods and the duration. I said it awkwardly. Clove. Clove is going to be one of the smaller bottles. There it is. Now clove is amazing. It is the strongest antiseptic oil. It also has numbing properties. It's an analgesic. So we talked about it in the cocoa for sore throat. It'll kill all kinds of things. However, you want to use it in a 1% dilution. I put that on the first page because it can be a skin irritant. Now, anciently, clove was the most expensive spice, and it was regarded as a general cure-all, and it was used in drinks and liqueurs. And then you've seen at Christmas time they do the clove-studded oranges. Well, they did that because it helped with contagion as well. So they didn't just use it at Christmas time. It was one of the oils used by the 4 thieves who plundered the plague victims in ancient times, and they didn't get sick. But one of the essential oils they used was clove to keep them from catching the plague when they did that. Now this was very interesting to me. The West Germans have developed a clove-based general anesthesia, and they use it, and the people are able to regain full consciousness within 20 minutes after their surgical procedure, and most often they don't have nausea with it. Pretty impressive, clove. It is the most antiseptic of all the essential oils. It has 3 to 4 times greater strength, antiseptic strength, than phenol or phenol, however you want to say that. And it has the most antioxidant properties of any of the essential oils, so that's important. It's often used in toothpaste and mouthwashes. You can get clove gums, you can get clove cigarettes. I wouldn't recommend them, but you can. In India, clove is used in dental care for cavities and for abscess gums and that sort of thing. And it's reported that if they put a dab of the clove on the actual cavity itself, it would make it go away. I don't know if it does, I don't know if it doesn't, but in India they use it that way. The Americans were the first ones to extract clove and use it on the gums to help relieve pain in the gums. And I tried this today. I have a house bunny. I have a little pet rabbit, and I let him loose, and it's spring, so he's hormonal. And he is chewing up the molding on all of the edges of the door. So one of the things you can do, it said, was to dab clove on areas that you want to discourage your pet from chewing on. So I'll give you an update on that, but I tried it today. It's really good for lung infections. It's been used historically to treat tuberculosis. It's good for headaches, gout, malignancy, so cancer, and weight loss. So if you know someone who's trying to quit smoking, they can take a drop of clove and put it on their tongue when they have that urge to smoke a cigarette. I thought that was important. It's excellent for toothache, and we rub it on the gums. It's really good in room sprays for sick rooms, people who are sick everywhere. And come on in. And so it's really good for contagion. So you've got a sick household, you're going to use clove, cinnamon, and I would put orange with that. Put it in a dilution of about 4 ounces, and you can put up to 120 drops of essential oil. And it smells fantastic. Cinnamon, clove, and orange. It's good for stomach upset. So clove, because it's a spice, you can imagine that it's really good for the digestive system. And it expels intestinal worms. Did you hear that? Intestinal worms. One of the people that just came in is very concerned about that because she's been reading the sushi articles. What are the ones that are anti-worm? So it also has numbing properties, and it's good for neuralgia and nerve pain, like we talked about, the fibromyalgia. It's good for urinary tract infections. And I'm talking a little bit more about that when we get to the scientific studies. It's very impressive. It's good for asthma and bronchitis. Now that one I wouldn't necessarily have thought of, but it is. Good memory stimulant. It's excellent for prevention of contagious diseases. It helps treat scabies. I had the unfortunate experience of treating a person who told me that the rash on their body was an allergic reaction, when in reality it was scabies. I gave them a massage. 2 weeks before I got married for my honeymoon, right? Okay? And that's the incubation time of scabies. I was saved because in the massage oil that I used, there was lemon, rosemary, and peppermint, which also all treat scabies. And I was scabies free for I was like, you have no idea what's going to happen if I have scabies for my honeymoon. I'm just saying. So, scabies in athlete's foot, clove works. And again, first line of defense against sore throats. And it's a really good insect repellent. Emotionally, it's good for anxiety, aphrodisiac. It's a mental stimulant and helps relieve mental exhaustion and fatigue. And you know, when you smell it, it does smell stimulating. That's very pleasant, so I can see how it would work as a mental stimulant or for exhaustion. That's really good for insomnia. Again, put it on the very edges of your pillow so you don't come in contact with it with your eyes. And in the organs and meridians that it treats is the large intestines and the lungs. In perfumery, it's a base note, so it's going to be a fixative, helps hold the blend together. And it's used a lot in natural potpourris. They'll put clove buds in it. And one of the things that you can do for a skin tonic to help your skin and help you feel better and also help with antibacterial is 30 drops of lavender, 20 drops of bergamot, and 5 drops of clove, and you put it in witch hazel and you can spray it on you. It's good like in a hot summer. Keep it in the refrigerator, spray it on you. It smells amazing. It blends well with the citrus oils mandarin and orange, and also with cinnamon, clary sage, grapefruit, rose, and ylang ylang. Now these are the scientific studies, and this is directly applicable to me. So there is a bacteria called Pseudomonas. It is a very virulent, nasty infection, and it was found that clove oil is very potent in killing the Pseudomonas bacteria. About, I want to say 6 years ago, I read on the internet of a Brazilian supermodel in her early 20s who died of a Pseudomonas bladder infection within 24 hours of contracting it. Died. Okay, and then my memory went back that when I had my daughter, I contracted a Pseudomonas bladder infection from the hospital during the birthing process. And my doctor's like, how did you do that? We usually find these on dead things. Like, I don't know, I'm at the hospital, you tell me. So I went through 3 rounds of antibiotics. She was telling me I wasn't going to be able to nurse anymore, that we were going to have to get some really serious antibiotics. But I started using the clove as a rinse, and it's very painful. You have to use just a little bit of it, make sure it's diluted. But I was able to stay alive. Very important. Didn't have to stop the nursing and do that. But I didn't actually realize that you could die from it. She was being a little minimizing with it. Yeah, pretty exciting. Pseudomonas. It's very good for fungal infections. Very good for destroying yeast, candida. And it's a very good anti-cancer therapeutic drug. So studies being done with clove and cancer. So, and I have all of where they're coming from here, the scientific studies and the references. So it also showed that it was good for reducing blood glucose levels for diabetics, and it's due to the phenol in the clove. Okay, we're going to say this because it's out there, and we might have some people that might need this. There are lots of sources that say that it helps with premature ejaculation. So I'm in the medical field. You can talk about this. That's an important problem if you want to have a beautiful, intimate relationship. So clove will help with that. And there is a resource at themarriagebed.com, which will give you all of the particulars about how to use that. I'm not going to go into that here, but it was pretty impressive. And so there we have that. Now we're going to talk about lavender. Lavender is the universal oil. It's going to be in one of the big blue bottles. There we are. If you have something going on, the first thing I want you to try is lavender. It will probably work. It works for so many things. It's the most versatile oil. In the last class, we talked about the man Rene Maurice Gattefoss, who was the person who coined the word aromatherapy. There was an explosion in his lab. He was a chemist and a perfumer, and he burned his arm really badly, and he put his arm into the nearest vat of oil, which happened to be lavender oil, and it healed his arm so quickly with no scarring, and he devoted the rest of his life to studying the properties of essential oils. So that being said, it's excellent for burns and also for skin growth. It's a cytophylactic. It's going to help with cell regeneration. And I could see you got a little bit on your hand, so smell it. That is lavender is one of the ones that you can use undiluted. Remember, two: tea tree and lavender you can use undiluted. Now, I had a client who happens to be here who was talking about that someone they know had an ear infection, and I want to talk about this. So this is really important. When my children were little and they'd get earaches and we'd get inner ear infection, not only did we do whatever prescription, but usually we could get the pain of the earache to go away within a few hours. So you take a cotton ball, you got the big old cotton ball, take about half of it out, put 1 drop of lavender in the center of it, and then fold it up so that that essential oil cannot contact the ear itself, the canal of the ear, and the vapors will go through the eardrum. It will help to kill the bacteria that's causing the inner ear infection, and it will help with pain very dramatically. So I had, I'll just quickly tell this story. I had a client years back who traveled to Finland. Her son was in Finland, and she got a cold, and on the way back, her eardrum burst on the airplane. It was bad. She got home, and it had such a large scab on the eardrum. She'd been through 3 rounds of antibiotic. Ear infection was still there. And the doctor was telling her, if this doesn't heal in the next 3 days, we're taking you in for reparative surgery on your eardrum. And you may have a hearing loss. She was a little panicked. So I told her about the eardrum trick with the cotton ball. So she tried it. She said, my husband loved it. It helped him sleep at night. 2 days, that big old scab fell out of her ear, and her doctor was like, how did you do that? Well, my massage therapist told me about lavender, and it worked. And she didn't have to have the surgery, and she was so excited. So it works. I have lots of lavender stories, but that one will suffice. So let's talk about the emotional properties of lavender. It helps to balance the emotions, and it brings calming and sedation when it's needed. It's really good for migraines. So in my spa, I have lavender and I have rosemary there at all times, once in a while peppermint. The lavender and rosemary together, we rub it across the base of the skull here with a little bit of a carrier oil, and by the temples, keeping it away from the eyes, and then you can rub it here, just so that they can smell it. Here is a little bit too much, because when you smell something for an extended period of time, your nose adjusts and you can't smell it. Put it a little further away. Like, how is it that we cannot smell our own breath? It's right under our nose, but we don't, because the nose activates. So it's really good for strong mental symptoms such as bipolar or manic depression. Good for nervous exhaustion. It's very soothing to the heart chakra, and it opens up the crown chakra up at the top of the head. Good for letting go of anger and compulsions. So OCD, right? OCD, washing your hands. So it's good for that. It's very helpful in resetting old habits of thought. And when we're trying to change something about ourselves and our personalities or the way we deal with something, it's really hard to find the ability to do that sometimes. So lavender can help reset that. It helps with insomnia, stress, depression, sadness, fear, and irritability. Now lavender, I have like an entire page of, there we are, here, microphone. It's blinking. And we're going to pause that for a moment, and we'll get right back to that. Okay, we're going to go back through some properties of lavender. It is an analgesic, so it's a painkiller. It helps stop spasms. It's a very good antiseptic, and it helps kill bacteria. It's good with bronchial secretion. So if you got a chest cold and you've got phlegm, it's good for that. Helps reduce coughing and sneezing. It's also good for water retention. It's a diuretic. Anti-migraine, it expels intestinal worms. It reduces rheumatism and arthritis, and it's an intestinal stimulant. I'm going to go pretty quickly through these because there's a lot. Reduces high blood pressure, calms nerves of the heart, that's important. Anticonvulsive, antidepressant, antitoxic. So you've been exposed to a lot of environmental toxins. This is one that will help with that. Aids in digestion. It stimulates cell growth. It's a deodorant, a sedative. And it stimulates the white blood cell production, which helps to increase our immune response. And this is another one that's really good for period pain. And you can rub it in the low back and in the front. It's good for abscess, acne, asthma. Now, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the scientific studies, but it is very impressive with asthma. I have asthma. It works to help with reducing boils, and they used to call them carbuncles. It's good for burns, sunburns. It's fantastic for sunburns. It'll take the pain out of a sunburn in, what did you say, hour two? Pretty impressive. And good with colic, conjunctivitis, eye infection. So I had a client that came this week. Her daughter came home with pink eye. And so we talked about using a compress, a lavender compress. So I'm going to tell you how to do it because it's impressive. As impressive as the ear trick, the eardrum trick, it works really well for pink eye. So you would take a warm bowl of water, a washcloth, drop 1 drop of lavender in and agitate it as much as you can. You'll see the film of lavender over the top of the water, and it needs to be really small droplets. Put the lavender, or put the washcloth in the lavender, wring it out, and put it over the eyes. And then keep putting it in the warm water, putting it over the eyes. The eyes have to be closed, and you have to make sure 1 drop and it's dispersed, otherwise it's going to be too much for the eyes. But it will clear up pink eye in like 24 hours. It is extremely impressive. It also takes down the pain and that feeling like you've got sand in your eyes. It's amazing. It's really good for cystitis and yeast infections. Really, really good for candida. You would use that internally. And so you could mix it with yogurt as the carrier, or you can use baking soda. Some sources say you could mix it with water and vinegar, but I don't find that to be terribly effective. Good for whooping cough, depression, skin irritations like psoriasis and eczema. Really good for diarrhea, so you would use that on the abdomen. We talked about the earache, the cotton ball trick. It works well for people with epilepsy. Again, there's that word, flatulence, so they help you be socially responsible. Use your lavender. Good for gallstones. It's another one that works for hair loss and halitosis, bad breath. Now, you actually could, there are recipes that use lavender flowers, so shortbread, lemonade, and you could make a mouthwash with it, with the lavender. It actually tastes pretty pleasant. Good for headache, good for lice and scabies, insomnia, laryngitis and sore throat. Again, you would rub it on the outside. Muscle spasm and nausea. Nerve pain, puncture wounds. I'm going to mention this again. I mentioned it in the last segment, but very important. Lavender will help to keep a puncture wound open so that it doesn't seal close and become septic. When I was nursing my daughter, I was walking in the night and contacted very strongly a needle that was in the carpet. It drove it into my calcaneus, my heel, hard enough that we had to use pliers to peel it out. So I was, it's 4 in the morning, and I'm thinking, I don't remember when I had my last tetanus shot, and I am in massive pain. So I sent my then husband to get the lavender, and I put it on the puncture wound. By the time I got up for the next feeding, which was 3-4 hours later, I could stand on my heel with no pain. It healed amazingly. So it's excellent for puncture wounds. Good for tuberculosis, throat infections, ulcers, vomiting, heart palpitations, trembling. Sometimes you get trembling when you're overly excited or agitated or fearful. That's a good thing to know. Irritability, fainting, panic, and hysteria. It's a really good oil for children because it's mild. And so, like I mentioned, it's a universal oil. You can use it for almost anything. And if you haven't, try it first and then try something different. It's really good for skin care and hair care. And it's good for normal, oily, and dehydrated, pretty much any type of skin condition. It's good for inflamed and sensitive skin. And it's good for broken capillaries. So people who have like rosacea kind of thing, it's good for that. And it's good to treat dandruff. And it has some antifungal properties. And sometimes dandruff, as the cosmetologist could attest, are caused by fungus. Yes. So it's good for that. She also told me that mold can grow on people's skin. Had a very unpleasant experience with that. So, you know, you could keep some lavender at your station. Mold growing on the back of their ears and on the back of their neck. That is hideous, right? Yeah. So it works on the stomach, lungs, and on the heart tonic. It's a heart tonic. It is a middle to top note, and it blends well with almost anything, but you use about 20% of it in the blend. And it works with tangerine neroli, which is an orange oil, bergamot, clove, rose, marjoram, clary sage, and Roman chamomile. Now we're going to get to the scientific studies. And this I can absolutely attest to. I have asthma. I have a violent allergic reaction to cigarette smoke. I can walk by somebody 25 feet from the building, inhale it, and start coughing enough that I can taste blood. I mean, it's serious. So I really hack. If I have lavender with me and I can put lavender under my nose and rub a little bit here, I do not have to use my inhaler. That is seriously impressive. Same thing with eucalyptus. So lavender and eucalyptus are excellent for asthma. They found that it also inhibits immediate type reaction, allergic reactions. So like an inflammation on the skin. My son used to have a terrible allergic reaction to mosquito bites. And it would cause a huge histamine reaction. It could get all the way up to the size of a 50-cent piece. That is the alarm. I told everyone to turn off their cell phones, and there I was. And so if he put lavender oil on the mosquito bite, it would reduce the histamine reaction in about 10 minutes. Had the school nurse call me actually once, and he'd been bitten, and she's like, your son's here and he's asking for you to bring lavender? So we did. They had a study with postpartum depression in women and found that it was very significant in helping with the postpartum depression, and it was much better than the control groups. And there were no adverse reactions. So depression, anytime they're treating depression, sometimes the cure is worse than the problem. And most of them will carry the warning that they may become suicidal. Let's see, you're treating depression, you may become suicidal. How does this help, right? So no side effects. You can use lavender. Now, there were several studies that were done on dental patients, and apparently that's one of the high fears in people. They get a lot of anxiety when they're going to the dentist, and they found that lavender helped reduce that significantly. And another study showed when they put lavender with orange together, again, another dental study, they had 200 patients, and they found that it not only reduced the anxiety, but it improved their mood in people that were waiting for their dental procedure. And so it's helpful in altering emotional states and really good for reducing anxiety in dental patients. And it also was very effective, this is another study, on lowering the blood pressure and the stress of clients. So they did a study with 50 people, and they inhaled lavender, ylang ylang, and bergamot once a day. So just sniff it right out of the bottle for 4 weeks. And they found that it reduced psychological stress responses, serum cortisol levels. Let me explain that. Cortisol is a hormone that is produced in the body from the adrenal glands when you're in a lot of stress. So it reduced blood cortisol levels as well as blood pressure. So very substantial scientific findings for the help of lavender. And they also helped that they also found that it helped to reduce anxiety in pre-operative people who are going into surgery. And it said that it was a simple, low-cost, effective intervention for people going into surgery to improve preoperative outcomes and also increase patient satisfaction. Apparently, our doctors and hospitals are now being graded on their patient satisfaction. It's a big deal. So eucalyptus. The eucalyptus it has a lot of chemical constituents, ketones are one of them, that make it toxic to the nervous system in high doses. So you never want to take this one internally. There are 500 varieties of eucalyptus trees, but only 15 are made into essential oils. Now when you smell the eucalyptus, obviously you're gonna feel it in a few places. Lungs and sinuses are the first thing. Does it feel calming or does it feel more energizing? Energizing, exactly. So it's a stimulant to the nervous system. So there's 500 varieties of eucalyptus trees, 15 are made into essential oils, and the trees grow up to 300 feet tall. And eucalyptus is one of the strongest natural antiseptics. I found this really interesting. In Tasmania, where the eucalyptus grows wild, they have a place called the Blue Mountains. And they're called Blue Mountains because the essential oils are so readily available in the leaves that the essential oil mist is in the air. And it causes it to look blue from a distance. And because it's so volatile, it creates a fire hazard. So the essential oil is actually in the air. Pretty interesting. It's just a little sidelight I found interesting, that only animals in the world that can eat eucalyptus because it has toxic properties are koalas. And the way that the baby koala gets those properties from the mom is it has a special kind of excrement, poop, that it eats until it builds up the immunity to the toxins. You'll never forget that about eucalyptus now, will you? I just thought that was really interesting. Like, wow, nature evolves in some very interesting ways. I'm going to talk about the eucalyptus general properties. It's very antiseptic, it's deodorizing, and it's used in a lot of mouthwashes and dental care. It's really good for sore muscles and sprains and strains, and it increases brainwave activity. I think when you smell that, you can kind of imagine, yeah, make you think a little clearer. It's calming and sedative, but it's also emotionally balancing. So it's something they would call a tonic. Whatever your body would need, it would either energize you or help to calm you down. So it could have either way, those properties. And it also works as a tonic on the body. So it's going to clear the mind to help you have more focus and concentration. And it's really great for jet lag. It's obviously good for lung complaints. And in perfumery or blending, when you're putting your blend together, it's a top note. Because you can smell it's kind of bright. So when you smell a top note, it smells and feels bright. It blends well with lemon, lavender, thyme, rosemary, pine, and other conifers. And the organ and meridian that it targets are the lungs and the bladder. This is one that also works very strongly on the adrenal fatigue and the adrenal glands. And the Eucalyptus globulus, which is the one that we smelled, is the most commonly used, and it's very potent, very camphorous, very strong smell. And in Tasmania, it's known as Tasmanian blue gum or gully gum, they call it. And so when you look at it, they're going to, like if you're ordering it, they're going to call it rectified, which means it's been filtered, or totem, which is natural or closest to the way it comes from the tree. And it's good for treating viruses, and it's a good cough expectorant. Very good for urinary tract infections also, and insect bites and sinus complaints. In skincare, it's really good for skin eruptions, so pimples, or in the UK, spots. It treats acne. Now this is important for some people. Cold sores, so herpes simplex 1 and 2, both genital and mouth herpes, and chicken pox, what do they call that when it's shingles, when it's that herpes simplex. It's good for that. So you can use the eucalyptus for that. Really good for staph infections like MRSA. You'd use it with tea tree, lemongrass, and geranium. And it's a really good balancer for the skin. And it's a nice uplifting scalp massage. Now there's another one, Eucalyptus smithii, and I didn't find it. I've used it somewhere special, and I don't think it's in there. But it's a really mild eucalyptus. It doesn't have that strong bite, that camphorous bite to it. And it's the least toxic to the nervous system. And it's an antiseptic. Oh, it is. Okay, good. Yes. And it's anti-inflammatory. It's a decongestant, a good diuretic. And it's also a vermifuge. It expels worms. So some of the things you'd use it for is an insect repellent, a deodorizer, disinfectant. It increases white blood cell activity, good for arthritis and rheumatism. And obviously for asthma, lung complaints, sinus, allergies, fever, flu. Works with poor circulation. And it's one that's really often used in liniments for sore muscles, sprains and strains. Good for headaches. And it also good for gallstone, cholera, emphysema, malaria, and typhoid. Eucalyptus, think about that. And it was used historically for tuberculosis. It also lowers blood glucose levels, so diabetics need to be aware of that. It treats urinary tract infections. Eucalyptus is another one that works really, really well on burns, but you're going to want to use that diluted. So whether you have a sunburn or a burn from the oven or whatever. And it's really good on sores. This is one that you want to use also in a breathing mix or an anti-contagion thing. You got a lot of people sick, get some eucalyptus in there. These are the scientific studies. So there's a variety called Eucalyptus citriodora. It smells a little bit like lemon and eucalyptus mixed together. And it was very effective in 32 tuberculosis compounds. So it found it to be 90% effective against already antibiotic resistant tuberculosis. Now, there's a couple of nurses in the audience, and tuberculosis is rampant right now, and it's because of, sadly, some of the politically correct ways of dealing with tuberculosis. In the past, they were quarantined, so it wasn't spread on your airplane. It wasn't spread in the public restroom, whatever. So we now have very virulent antibiotic-resistant tuberculosis. So right in this scientific study, 90% of the antibiotic-resistant TB was killed. This one is also about asthma and other respiratory illnesses, and they used the eucalyptus with it, and they found that it controlled the mucus production in the lungs, and it also controlled the inflammatory effects, and it was an antibacterial. So dealing with a lot of things there. And so they concluded it's really good for the prevention and exacerbation of asthma, and that it's good for other cardiopulmonary diseases. Geranium. Geranium is a flower, and this one has a strong effect on the hormonal system. So again, you're not going to use this one. They recommend not at all during pregnancy. So there's a lot of varieties of geranium. It's really warm. It's kind of heavy, very strong scent. And geranium oil historically was used by the Egyptians in their skincare to make their skin beautiful, and they used it for cancerous growths. I thought that was pretty interesting. So the four oils that were used by the Egyptians in their embalming and also their skincare: geranium, frankincense, myrrh, and cedarwood. So those are really good for anti-aging oils in the skincare. And geranium has been used for centuries in wound healing and skincare, and we'll talk about some scientific properties with that. Geranium oil is one of the oils that is used to cut rose oil. So if they're an unscrupulous aromatherapy company, they'll take rose geranium, smells like rose, and put it in with the rose and sell it, because actual rose oil is very expensive. It was very popular in Victorian eras. They used it in their little finger bowls, their finger dipping bowls after their dinner time. And the African Zulu and Hottentot tribes used geranium for medicinal purposes forever. There are 600 varieties of geranium that mock the smell or the aroma of other plants. And one of them is rose geranium. There's only 10 of those 500 or 600 varieties that are used for essential oils. And it's very chemically complex. There are over 250 compounds in geranium, but most often used is the bourbon type or the rose geranium. It's antiseptic. It stimulates lymphatic and capillary circulation. And so it has some mild diuretic properties, going to work with that lymphatic system. It is a mild painkiller. Again, expels worms. We've had a lot of talk about that. A very good deodorant. And it also, this surprised me, very effective against MRSA. Methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, so MRSA. And you can combine that with lemongrass. Very important female hormonal balancer. So you could use it for menopause. It can help with the underproduction of estrogen that happens in menopause. It's good for PMS, for engorged breasts. It's also excellent oil for candida infections, vaginal candida infections. And you can use that with lavender and bergamot together. It's good for healing the inflammation of the skin. And it's also good for urinary tract infections. So you could use either geranium or lavender, and you put it in a 2-ounce bottle, little squeeze bottle. And if you have a urinary tract infection, you would rinse every time you urinate. It's really shook up. So this is another oil that's really good for herpes simplex, so genital or cold sores or shingles, and you would use it in a ratio of 1:1:1. So 1 drop geranium, 1 drop eucalyptus, 1 drop bergamot. Hopefully none of you have that problem, but if you do, really important to know. It's good on cellulitis and increases lymphatic flow. It's another one that's good on throat infections. That was a big surprise to me. I wouldn't have pictured geranium working for that. Really good for kidney stones. So if you have kidney stones and kidney stone pain, you know, rub it right on the area. You could also rub it on the reflexes of the foot. The kidneys are located just about right here. So you would use a very strong concentration of the kidney, of the essential oils on that kidney reflex. Treats burns, bruises. That's very interesting. It'll help with bruises. So does peppermint. It sterilizes wounds. It stops hemorrhaging when it's applied on the dressing. So they put it on the gauze or whatever, stick it onto the wound. It's very good for hemorrhoids, and it helps jaundice and treats facial pain like trigeminal neuralgia. It's good for stomach and intestinal problems, gastroenteritis, good for lumbar pain, good for candida and thrush. Like sometimes babies get the thrush in their mouth, breastfeeding babies. And it's a really good insecticide, and it combats lice. Which, again, lice and bed bugs have had a real heyday recently, increase in those. I have a client who works for a company, and they place people in housing as they're working on a contract. And they have somebody on staff that goes in and has to kill all the bed bugs. They have dogs that sniff out the bed bugs. It's crazy. She said, you cannot imagine the problem we have with it. And eucalyptus and geranium will work for that. Remember when we went to Los Angeles and we brought our bed bug spray? Okay, we did. So in skincare, it's one that's used extensively. It's a good astringent. It works for cell regrowth. So it's a wound healer. Works with scars and cuts and burns, chapped and inflamed skin, things like psoriasis, eczema, acne. And we're going to talk some more about how it works on wound healings with the scientific studies. It's an excellent oil for anti-aging because it helps with the onset of wrinkles. The organs and glands that it targets are the throat and the kidney. It also lowers glucose levels, and it's especially a stimulant to the adrenal cortex that are located, again, above the kidneys. And this was important. It helps to promote throat health for speakers and singers. We've got a couple here. So you're out there speaking, you can use geranium on the throat to help with that duration. Emotionally, it's a tonic, so it's also uplifting and stimulating, and also sedating and calming. So it depends on what your body needs. It will balance that. It's good for depression and anxiety. And it's very useful in meditation for releasing unpleasant memories. Good for headache and stomachache. It's a middle to top note. It's a flower, so you can kind of smell. It's kind of a lighter smell, so it's going to be middle to top note. And it blends really well with other flower oils like rose and also basil, sandalwood, frankincense, ginger, and nutmeg. This one that's used extensively in perfumes. If you read geraniol as one of the ingredients in your perfume, it's geranium. Cineol is lemon. So, and you can use it up to 15% in blends. My Giorgio perfume is a natural perfume, and it's got a lot of those in it because geranium is one of the bases. In the scientific studies, there's a woman, Kathy Kevill, and she said that in Azerbaijan, they are doing experimental outpatient clinics, but people go into a special aromatherapy room where they inhale aromatherapy for a certain amount of time, like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And they found that geranium is a balancer, and it lowers blood pressure, or it will raise it because it's the balancer by several points. So whatever that person needs, they can measure it. Isn't that amazing? And they use it extensively for depression and mental disturbances. Again, another application for a psych ward. This scientific study was done about hard to heal wounds. So they took a lot of wounds that had already been resistant to antibiotics, had not healed with that, and they put geranium oil on the dressing, applied it to the skin, and it was remarkably effective. And it said that it was effective in cases of frequent recurrences of infections caused by resistant pathogens. So it had already built up a tolerance, and it was going to not die, but geranium helped it. It's a natural tick repellent. They did a study of 10 varieties of geranium and found that it was 90% effective in repelling the Lone Star tick. If it's a Lone Star tick, I'm going to guess it's somewhere like Texas or something. I don't know. But ticks are a big problem. And what is the disease that... Lyme disease. You do not want Lyme disease. So, important. So, you know, along with whatever bug spray you're using, you might want to put some geranium oil around your pant legs and such. This was a very important and surprising thing to me. They tested geranium. Geranium, we mostly think of skincare, hair care, that kind of thing, perfume. It was very effective against MRSA. So they found that it had strong activity against all multi-drug resistant strains of MRSA. Geranium, go figure. Marjoram, we're narrowing the home stretch here. Marjoram is very effective on the hormonal system, again, not used in the first 5 months of pregnancy. It is known as the plant tranquilizer because of its extremely calming effects on the nervous system. It is the Greek word for joy of the hills. And it was one of the strewing herbs that they threw on the floor during medieval times. It's going to be in a smaller vial, it's going to be something like that. It should be written on the top. It was a strewing herb to fight contagion and pests. The Egyptians used it for overcoming grief. And they dedicated it to the god of their underworld, Osiris. And they used it in the preparation of the deceased, so they used it for embalming. And they also used it for love potions, so love and death, interesting. It's also used very extensively in perfumes and culinary arts. We have a couple people who've gone to culinary school, and so marjoram is one of the major herbs used. It has very strong antimicrobial and antioxidant properties. And one study showed that marjoram killed every bacteria that it was tested on. Okay, sorry, marjoram is probably up in my room. Marjoram is very antibacterial. The Greeks believed that if marjoram grew wild on a person's grave, it meant they were happy in the afterlife. And the Greeks and Romans regarded it as good luck, and they put garlands or wreaths around the newlyweds. And it was they dedicated it to the goddess Aphrodite, who is a goddess of love, fertility, and beauty. It's very antiviral. That's important. So most of them are antibacterial, but marjoram is antiviral. So if you're dealing with a virus, antibiotics don't work usually for those. So we have marjoram. It's good for an expectorant, for coughs. It's going to work on the lungs. It's also very, very strong sedative. Good for insomnia. They use it in liniments for muscle pain, for sprains and strains. This one lowers blood pressure, so the person who was talking about that had low blood pressure probably not going to want to use marjoram a lot. It works very strongly on the digestive system, which would be obvious because it's a cooking herb. And it relieves spasm, constipation, and again, flatulence. It's good for headaches, migraines, and colds. So marjoram applied will really help a headache. Again, this one repels ticks. It's good for toothache, and it's a very strong respiratory stimulant. So it can be used to treat asthma. And you can rub this one diluted. You're going to put it in carrier oil, rub it on the temples. It's really good for a calming effect. It will help insomnia, help you get some good sleep. And it helps you breathe better. I went to the fair, and they had a little jar. It was a little tiny mason jar. And they put some kind of sponge in it, and a vegetable oil, and marjoram. That's all it was. And they were selling it for $25 as a snoring aid. If you put this open beside your bed, you won't snore, unless you have sleep apnea. And apparently it worked really well. I had a couple clients who came in and told me they'd used it. So, there you go. It's a good menstrual stimulant, so if you're having a late period and you haven't had it, you can use that, and you're going to avoid it in the first 5 months of pregnancy. Really, really good essential oil for children. When my children were little, we would use marjoram, orange, and lavender together for a calming bath before they went to sleep. Or you can, right there for general health and relaxation. It's great for all skin types, but especially sensitive skin. It's going to work on the organ meridian of the digestive, the respiratory, and also the muscular system. This is important, and there are a lot of people who have medical background here. It helps the body make serotonin, and that helps us maintain our mood balance. Serotonin is an important thing that they put in antidepressants. So it's going to help with that, and it also helps the functioning of our cardiovascular system, muscles, and the endocrine system. It's very calming. It's good for stress, insomnia, and like chamomile, also irritability. Also good for grief. And loneliness. Now this is loneliness. You wouldn't think that we could use an essential oil for loneliness. Marjoram. It's really good for if you've been sick for a while, general debility, you can use that. And it's said to be a mild aphrodisiac. It works as in perfumery and blending. It's going to be blending well with lavender, neroli, sandalwood, the other citrus oils, and spices. And you only use up to 5% in a blend. These are the scientific studies. It said it had very high antimicrobial properties. So it's going to kill bacteria and microbes. Marjoram inhibited the growth of all bacteria tested in this study. And of special note, Pseudomonas, we talked about Pseudomonas earlier, and Salmonella. Salmonella causes food poisoning. So it inhibited that. It also affected E. coli and staph. It was also a very effective antifungal, and it helped kill Aspergillus niger, which is interesting. That's what they put in Beano. You are taking a mold into you to combat flatulence. Look it up. So another scientific study, they did some studies on, several studies on some poor rats. And they exposed them to some pretty toxic things. And they found that it helped with the antioxidant production, and it protected their kidneys. The lab rats also protected their testes, the male lab rats. And so it was a really good antioxidant. They said that that proves that it will also translate into antioxidant protection for humans. This is another study on the nephrotoxicity, which is kidney toxins. They gave them this terrible thing, and it causes toxicity in the kidney. And it said marjoram provided significant oxidative protection in rats exposed to high oxidative stress, so toxins. And it also protected against biochemical changes and histopathological changes, so changes in the cell. It's going to protect the cells. And that's another one on rats and oxidative stress. So think of it as being, we try to take antioxidants in through our diets. This is really important in prevention of cancer and other diseases, so marjoram will help in that. They also showed one that it helped with counteracting the effects of lead poisoning. I thought that was pretty important. And so they concluded that it was a useful herbal remedy for controlling oxidative damages. So about 4 studies on that. Almost done. We've got orange here. When you smell orange, tell me how it makes you feel. I'll let you pass that around. So oranges originated in Southeast Asia. And initially they were very expensive, so they were only used during holiday times. They were considered a luxury. And then they began cultivating oranges in the Middle East in the 9th century. And by the 15th century, they were brought to Europe. And Spanish explorers brought them to Florida and then to California in the 17th and 18th century. Today, oranges are widely available. They're grown all over, and they're one of nature's perfect foods. So we'll pause here. Would you guess that orange is a top note or a base note? You feel high, bright?
Yeah, it's probably more, yeah.
Top note, okay? And did it make you feel happy, energized, rather than calm?
Yeah.
Okay, so yep, see, you're getting it. So now you can smell an oil and kind of get the basic properties. Good. Orange is the only plant to produce 3 essential oils. There should be one called petitgrain in there. Petitgrain is an essential oil distilled from the leaves. It's used a lot in perfumery and skincare. Neroli is distillation of the flowers, and it's extremely expensive. It smells heavenly. I don't have any neroli because I used it all. And the regular orange oil that you smelled is from the rind. When you're peeling an orange and you get that sticky stuff on your hands, that's essential oil of orange. So it's very readily available. It's not an expensive oil to distill the essential oil out. I found this very interesting. They found some compounds in the essential oil of rose. That one is the petitgrain. Mm-hmm. It's real bright, herby type smell. Yeah. They found that these chemical the compounds in the citrus fruit can potentially lower cholesterol more than the prescription drugs. So how many statin drugs, and what are the side effects of statin drugs? How scary is that? So they found this in the citrus peels, and that's where essential oils come from. So by extrapolation, I'm going to say that essential oil of orange will help with that as well. So it's a gentle tonic. It's going to help you feel good. It's good for the whole body. Oranges are really good for the digestive system, which seems obvious. It's good for constipation and dyspepsia, which means stomach ache. Good for heartache and insomnia. When you smell that, it just feels good. So it makes sense that it's good for heartache. It's actually helpful in reducing heart palpitations and high blood pressure. And you can do that, reduces your blood pressure by several points just smelling orange. It's one of the oils that I use a lot when I'm giving a scalp massage. It's really good for nervous tension, anxiety, and general well-being. This surprised me when I was doing reading the scientific studies. I didn't know that orange was that antiseptic. And so we'll go through that, but it is. So, and it's really nice to use it. It's very uplifting. Makes a good furniture polish, and it's a really good oil for children. But here's one caution. It can be irritating to the skin, so you want to use it in low dilutions, just about 3 drops for kids. It's a very powerful lymphatic stimulant, so it's going to help with slimming and stimulating the lymphatic circulation and weight loss. So it would be the first oil I'd think about if I was having water retention. Orange, grapefruit, and then lemon. And then you're going to want to, those are all skin irritants, so you really want to put them with a good carrier. It's really good for detoxifying, and it works in the organ meridians of the digestion and lymphatic system. So we mentioned before, uplifting, antidepressant. It lightens the mood, calming, counteracts feelings of isolation. Really good for emotional heartache. So along with ylang ylang, which we didn't smell, good for heartache. In perfumery, this is really important. Most blends have orange in it. It's called an extender. It's a middle to top note. And 1 drop of jasmine, which is an extremely expensive oil, can be smelled in 450 drops of orange. So a full ounce of orange oil, you put 1 drop of jasmine and you can still smell the jasmine. So it's used in perfumes, used in blends. And it blends really well with flower oils, spice oils, that sort of thing. So cloves, cinnamon, cardamom, ginger, frankincense, sandalwood, black pepper, and vetiver. But this one also can cause photosensitivity, so you don't want to put a big orange blend on you and go out and suntan or go to the tanning beds because you can get spots. These are the scientific studies. So we talked about cortisol, that's the fight or flight hormone, and they measure it in the blood serum. And they found that children who are going in for dental procedures had reduced cortisol levels, and also their pulse rate was lower, and they had reduced anxiety levels. So there are several studies here that talk about orange and anxiety. They're different kinds. This is kind of fun, I think, because they studied males, macho guys. There were 40 healthy adult males, and they were subjected to anxiety-producing situations. They didn't say what they were, but there you go. And they tested really interesting things. So measures of the gastrocnemius, which is your calf. They've tested the muscle tension there, their heart rate, and also how they felt and how others observed them. Like, do they look really agitated? And so they diffused 2 to 10 drops of orange oil. And this was really important. It said that it had an acute anti-anxiety activity. So meaning very strong anti-anxiety. And it supported its use as a tranquilizer by aromatherapists. It was effective against tuberculosis. Now that surprised me because when I smell orange, I don't think lungs. I wouldn't think TB, but it was very effective against 99, it inhibited the growth of some strains more than 99%. Tuberculosis, orange. So these were also antibiotic resistant strains of tuberculosis. This one surprised me, and I thought it was really interesting. Again, we've got some culinary people here. Valencia oil was tested against E. coli and salmonella on refrigerated beef cuts. So they're already refrigerated, but they had salmonella. And they put a 3% dilution. They sprayed the beef cuts, and it significantly reduced the salmonella and the salmonella and the E. coli. And orange oil was also used as an anti-staph agent in wound dressing models, without any damage to the tissue. Now that kind of surprised me because again, orange oil is a little bit of an irritant to the skin. They put it on the bandage, stuck it on there, no damage. Interesting. Peppermint, this is our last oil. All right, so caution in peppermint, and it's going to be in a small one, yes. Peppermint is a skin irritant, and when I was initially learning about peppermint, it says you can use up to 3 drops in a bath. I use 10 drops of peppermint in a bath, and had a very painful experience. You don't want to use peppermint oil and get it anywhere near your eyes. And if you need to get peppermint or any essential oil off your hands or off your eyes, if you do get it by your eyes, do not use soap. You use a vegetable oil. It dilutes it, it takes it off, okay? So vegetable oil is your friend. 1% only in peppermint for your blends. So the Roman scientist Pliny, who lived in 23 to 79 AD, recorded that the Greeks and Romans used peppermint to flavor their wines and their sauces. They used it as decorative elements on their tables, their banquet tables, and they used it medicinally. And the Egyptians grew peppermint. We found it in the pyramids. Now, traditionally, peppermint is named after the nymph Nymph. And she was apparently the mistress of Pluto. And Pluto's wife got a little upset about that and killed her. But Pluto brought her back to life as a peppermint plant. Okay, so mint. That's where it came from. Isn't that interesting? Okay. Alexander the Great would not let his soldiers anywhere near peppermint because he believed that it would give them erotic thoughts and would weaken their strength and their ability to fight. Okay? So, yeah. Maybe aphrodisiac, I don't know. In the 18th century, peppermint started to be used for medicinal purposes, and Aristotle also believed it to be an aphrodisiac. The Arabs used it, and still do, in their drinks. They'll mix it with yogurt and peppermint to increase virility. There you go. It was also used as a strewing herb on the floors in medieval times, and it works in the organ meridians of the liver, the stomach, and the large intestines. Pretty obvious that it's going to work on the stomach. It's an herb. So you rub in your temples. If you have a little headache there, peppermint's awesome for that. And you want to make sure that you don't use it if you have really sensitive skin. And if you have homeopathic remedies, you want to keep peppermint far away from it because it will avoid the effect of your homeopathic remedies, which is really a bummer. They're very expensive and you don't want them to be avoided. Peppermint is antiseptic. It's another antiviral agent and it's a stimulating tonic. Obviously, you feel it in your lungs and your sinuses when you take it. Good for allergies, colds, and flu. It's a stimulant to the nervous system, which is obvious, and it's really good for stomach problems. I recommend this one. You can take 1 drop in a glass of water, and it will kill bacteria in your food and in the water, like when you're traveling. There's some scientific studies we're going to talk about peppermint and water. Really good. Have you ever had what they call it sour stomach? You know, like you burp in something that tastes and smells like sulfur. Really good for that. And you can take 1 drop of peppermint oil, about a tablespoon of carrier oil, and again, rub it clockwise on your stomach. It will get rid of that. Good for heartburn and irritable bowel. It stimulates the liver and gallbladder. And it also increases capillary circulation, so it's good for bruises. It's a natural painkiller. They use it a lot in muscle ligaments. It's very good for reducing fever and lowering body temperature. So if you have someone who's in a fever, you can use an over high fever. Fevers help our bodies to heal. But if they're too high, you get Epsom salt, 1 drop of peppermint, stick them in a cooler bath, and it will help that. We talked about how it helps the muscles and lymphatic system. It's an insecticide. This one treats scabies. It was in the magic blend that kept me from getting them. Really good for dizziness, vertigo. And it's good with eucalyptus on the lungs. It's good for TB. Again, kills intestinal parasites. And obviously really good for bad breath. How many mints, gums, everything have peppermint in them? Good for headaches. Really good for headaches. 1 drop of peppermint rubbed at the back of the temples or back of the skull will cure a headache. Really good for nausea. You can just inhale that if you have travel sickness, motion sickness, or in pregnancy. And good for bug bites and scrapes. Really good for things like poison ivy, poison oak, dermatitis, bug bites, itchy skin. Think about it that. Good for herpes, ringworm, and they say it's good for hair growth also. Very purifying, and it strengthens the skin's natural defense against microbes. A good insect repellent for gnats, bed bugs, and scabies. It was in our blend. Good antidepressant. Obviously, it's a mental stimulant. It fights fatigue and nervous exhaustion. So if you are really overexhausted, like we probably feel right now, peppermint, send that peppermint around 1 more time. It'll help clear our mind. It refreshes the spirit. Good for jet lag. And good in your hotel room to disinfect. Think bed bugs and bacteria. And it's really good for times like now where you've had very long periods of concentrated intellectual work. Brings clarity and focus. It's a top note, which seems obvious when you smell it. It's nice and bright. And so it doesn't blend with a lot of things, but the citrus and herbs, it does. Now we're to scientific studies. This was really important. They took peppermint just like that, and they smelled it before they ate. This study was done by Dr. Alan Hirsch. He wrote the book Sensational Weight Loss. 3,000 participants, and they were not successful in any other kind of dieting. They inhaled peppermint, and they ate 2 to 4 meals a day. Average weight loss was 30 pounds. They actually had to kick some people out of the study because they lost too much. Pretty impressive. Post-surgery nausea. In the UK, they use peppermint before they go into surgery. And so when they come out of surgery, they have a lot less need for the anti-nausea or anti-vomiting drugs. Really good for smoking addiction. 1 drop of peppermint on the tongue when they start the craving, and it helps. 2 scientific studies on exercise, and then we're finished. They did a study of 30 healthy males, and they measured athletic performance. So I won't go through all of that, but blood pressure, heart rate, time before exhaustion, and how much oxygen was left in the muscles. And they found that they were very significantly improved in 5 minutes, just inhaling peppermint, and especially their grip force. So they were stronger after inhaling peppermint. The next study, they actually took 1 drop of peppermint and a half a liter of water every day for 10 days. And then they measured before and after athletic performance. And so they measured them on the treadmill to how long they could do the exercise and how long before exhaustion, and also how much oxygen was left in the muscle. And they found that it improved every measure of athletic performance. Pretty exciting. So, last thing we're going to talk about, and it will be in a handout, is how much you use. So the average, if you're going to make 4 ounces of a massage oil, which you would use on your body, 50 to 60 drops. If you had a very specific thing, like you had a bruise or something, you would use 2 ounces, 50 to 60 drops, so a little more concentrated. If you were going to do the reflexes on the feet, 1 ounce, 50 to 60 drops. So 50 to 60, 4, 2, and 1 ounces. In a bath, you'd use 10 to 15 drops. You got to make sure you put it with Epsom salt or a vegetable oil if you like that oily feeling. I don't. And you put it in, you draw the bath, get it all ready, put the essential oil with the Epsom salt, and then get into the bath. Otherwise, it's all going to be in the air. It won't benefit your body. You can also inhale it, get a bowl of hot water, something like this, put the essential oils in it, put a towel over your head, so that'll be good for lungs. A face oil, you're going to use 10 drops in 1 ounce of jojoba, and for scalp treatment, like for hair growth, 50 drops in 2 ounces of jojoba. So thank you for your time and attention. That was a lot of information. I hope that you learned a lot of things, and the information will be available for you in a handout. And this concludes our Power of Aromatherapy, the Advanced Therapeutic Properties and Blending. I'm Phoenix Alexander, Certified Aromatherapist. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us on the film today. And get out there and use your aromatherapy. Thank you.